Hey, before we get started today, just one quick little pitch. I got an email from somebody who said they were thinking maybe about going on the cruise, but really weren't sure if they wanted to. And his wife said, no, you should go. They'd lost a couple of daughters to progressivism in college. And she said it would do you a lot of good to be around the friends you haven't met yet. So if you're one of those people who are kind of on the fence about coming, we're going to have ourselves a fine old time. Going to be nothing but fun. And you'll get a chance to say what's on your mind without having to look at the floor or stew about what might have happened at last Thanksgiving. So if you want to come out and have a real good time with a bunch of people in a friendly environment, we'll be looking forward to seeing you. Details are down below. Scotty, take it away.
She is living her dream life. I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle now. And Bill, her name is Katrina Holte. She lives with her husband, Lars, in Hillsboro, Oregon. And she couldn't be more delighted that she has quit her job in a busy payroll department so she could devote herself to being a 1950s style housewife. Yes, you heard me right. She's actually making her own dresses, rather flattering dresses at that. She's doing a ton of dishes and laundry. She's laying out her husband's clothes before he goes to work, and she prepares his breakfast. She has dinner on the table for him promptly when he gets home from work. Was this Lars's idea? No, Bill. It was Katrina's idea. As you might imagine, some people will see this as an attack on the very progress that women have enjoyed over the past 50 or 60 years. But what do you think about it?
Well, first of all, she's not alone. She's not alone in this regard. She's not the only old-fashioned housewife in America. There are millions and millions and millions of women who are doing that on a daily basis and find their lives happy and filled with contentment. So just let's get that out of the way. But I think the bigger issue here, and the one that is going to generate all of the electricity on this subject, is because you make a choice to do something is not coercion of somebody else to do something. And this gives me a chance to be really clear on a couple things because I've obviously taken some positions that I think are consistent and coherent. But again, here to give you an example, I don't for a minute think that women should be limited, if they're going to be anything, to teachers, secretaries, and nurses. The entire explosion of productivity in this country has been largely due to the fact that we decided to put half of the population to work. So the ability to have a job, the ability to have equal pay, equal rights under the law, all of those things, which have been in place for quite a long time now, is essential. And to say that I'm in favor of it is to understate the case. Of course I'm in favor of it. I think that women, just like anyone else, because I believe in individuals, I believe any individual should be able to do, or at the very least, should be able to pursue whatever happiness they have in their hearts in this country. And that's all I want for the American people, is for that freedom to remain. Now, the idea that somebody would come up with a choice that had been fought against by the women's liberation movement is not an indication on her part of saying, no, all of you people who are now doctors and lawyers and business administrators, I'm saying you need to go back and be housewives. She's not saying that. And by the fact that she's saying, I'm happy doing this, she's also not saying, therefore you must.
That's interesting,
She is
Bill,
coming out with a position
to reinforce
that is
that idea,
radical, only because it's been demonized so effectively. And this is where the left always goes over the cliff and off the rails. When Black people were legally discriminated against and they couldn't go into certain restaurants or so on, and if it made you a liberal to support equal rights for Blacks, then I was a liberal then. And so was everybody of conscience. And if the issue is, do women have a right to work? Do they have a right to own property, a right to vote, a right to get the same pay as men? These things are so archaic now that it's almost ridiculous to ask the question. But needless to say, of course I believe in these things. Of course I do. This is the pattern that we've seen, not just in this country, but throughout history. You start something called the Environmental Protection Agency because you have rivers that are filled with mercury, landfills that are filled with mercury, cars that are emitting puffs of blue smoke, jets leaving black streaks in the air. The Great Lakes are just sterile bodies of icky water, and so on. So you create the Environmental Protection Agency, and you put some laws into effect that forces businesses and other people to clean up their mess. And the next thing you know, after 20 years, the country the rivers are remarkably clean, shockingly clean. The Great Lakes are filled with fish. The Cuyahoga River's no longer on fire, all the rest of it. At which point a healthy society would say, we have achieved victory. Let's have a parade. Let's be vigilant that some of these standards aren't eroded. But we can do that with a staff of 2 or 3. And if it turns out that we're falling backwards, then we can bring some more people onto the cause. That's not how it happens. In the case of the EPA, in order to justify their existence, they had to constantly find smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller little what they considered to be violations, but which most rational people would not. And for example, one guy I think it was in Oregon, had put a duck pond into his property, had used the plastic linings, all of it, but he didn't get a permit. So he had to dig up the duck pond and then pay the permit. And I don't know if he put it back in again or not. That kind of thing is where the organization or the cause has become so fossilized and so institutionalized that it is no longer working for the good of the people. It's working to their direct harm. And this is what I feel about the whole feminist movement. Votes, yes. Equal rights, yes. Equal pay, yes. The ability to do any job that you are qualified to do, yes. But when I say qualified to do, what I mean by that is if part of the qualifications of being a fireman is to lift 180 pounds over your shoulders and carry it down a ladder, then just because women should have the right to pursue whatever job opportunities they want to, that doesn't mean that you have to lower the standards of that particular job in order to accommodate women. You don't have to change the job of firemen in order to accommodate people who are blind. You don't have to change the rules for people who are in wheelchairs. You don't have firemen in wheelchairs, not out of a national cruelty and a disdain for the disadvantaged or the disabled. You don't have firemen in wheelchairs because you can't be a fireman in a wheelchair. You work in an office in the fire department and so on. You get the idea. But this woman's declaration is going to get a lot of heat because she is saying something that is true and that has been so demonized for so long, namely that many people find themselves far happier at home taking care of the house and the family than they do dealing with the stress of the world and the house and the family in most cases. And I'm very glad that she found a place in life where she's happy. That's what I want for every American.
Bill, as just a coda to what you were just saying, for about 20 years, I was a vegetarian. And anytime anybody found out that I was a vegetarian, they felt as if they needed to explain how they too could be vegetarians, but because they don't eat any red meat and they barely eat any chicken, and it would be very easy for them to do so. And I would just kind of wave them off and say, look, I'm not talking about you. In fact, I didn't even bring up the subject. I'm not trying to make you a vegetarian. You asked, and I'm just telling you, but I'm not, and there's that sense in which one person's behavior by human nature makes another person evaluate their own behavior and think, is this a morally good or bad thing? How am I perceived because I do this or I don't do this? So anyway, let me go on with this woman, Katrina Holte. She says, this is interesting, her motivation for doing this. She says, when I look at everything that's happening in the world now, I feel like I belong in a nicer, more old-fashioned time. I agree with old-fashioned values. I like being a housewife, taking care of your family, nurturing the people in it, and keeping your house in excellent condition so everyone feels relaxed. And this is the interesting thing, because typically, at least on the feminist left, women who do this are perceived as being women without power. But what she says is that she likes being able to be home and decide how things will be run and get things done, and she's in charge. Isn't that a fascinating view of that? Because when she was, taking care of payroll for some company, she was always at somebody else's beck and call, and here she is running her home.
Yes, and there's a long precedent for this, certainly in English history for hundreds of years. Knights and dukes and so on would go off to war. They'd go on crusades, be gone for 6 months, be gone for 6 years in some cases. And almost all of that time, it was up to this person's wife to handle the estate, not just the home, the entire estate. So women having the economic decisions about how to spend the essentially the resources that the man brings home in this particular set of cases goes back a long way. And I have no doubt that she finds that relieving and satisfying. The reason I think your analogy about the vegetarian thing is so apt is because when somebody says that they're a vegetarian, even if you don't say it, even if it's just somebody asks you and you say, I'm a vegetarian, whether you like it or not, or whether you realize it or not, when a person says I'm a vegetarian, there is a societal perception that that person has some sort of additional virtue than you do, that they are willing to make sacrifices in order to protect the lives of innocent animals or something along those lines that you're not. And so when you say that people talk to you about how they almost became vegetarians, or conversely, sometimes the sort of reflexive kind of anger at vegetarians, like I'm a predator, and all of that is a result of people having their moral stature questioned by somebody else's behavior. And what's going on with this woman is she is not only accepting but actively promoting the exact lifestyle that feminism had condemned for virtually all of feminism's history. The idea that women staying at home and raising children, running the household, and so on, because women had been trapped in that role for so long, in order to get them out of that trap, feminism has made a point of demonizing that aspect of life for women. If you nowadays, if you say I'm a housewife and I'm happy, you'll be roundly condemned. You'd probably be stoned by modern feminists, because they will perceive you to be making the argument that they've been fighting against their entire lives and careers. But that's not the case. The entire moral legitimacy of the feminist movement is based on, should women have the chance? Should they be able to? Should they have the opportunity to do all of the things that men do? And if they decide to do all of the things that women have traditionally done. But as usual, as in the case of the EPA I mentioned earlier, they've taken it too far. Now they say that because we don't want to be just housewives, if you're a housewife, you're ignorant, you lack ambition, you're not fully empowered, you're all of this nonsense. And it is nonsense. It is demonization of people for taking a position that you're fighting against when you no longer need to fight against that position. And by the way, there was never a time when happy housewives were keeping women from going into jobs. There were other things that were keeping women from top-level executive positions, but happy housewives weren't one of them. So this whole thing is an example of how, in a society where most of the serious injustices have been dealt with, at least they've been dealt with legally. Once again, the level of outrage must be maintained, especially if you're determined to get power to change everything. If things are more or less okay, why do we need you? So I suspect that's probably why this thing is actually news. But again, as I said at the beginning, she's certainly not the only one.
There is a passage that some of our biblically literate audience will be aware of in Proverbs chapter 31, talking about such a woman as Katrina Holte is. I don't know if Katrina is a Christian or a reader of the Bible, but among the things that it says in there is that she'll make her own clothes. She considers a field and buys it. She takes care of her household. And there's one interesting phrase here. It says she dresses herself with strength and makes her arms strong. I find that that's just kind of an interesting perspective, Bill. And I'm, again, like when I was a vegetarian, I'm not trying to push this idea on anybody, but I thought that Katrina Holte is doing something that does not fit the cultural narrative and yet comes across in some ways as above it and at peace.
I wish her absolute happiness, the same way that I wish people, women who have no desire to be housewives, absolute happiness. This is the entire point, to open up opportunities to people who had been denied them in the past is not the same as to say now there are new things that you cannot do. There used to be things that you couldn't do, like be a doctor or a lawyer, whatever the case may be. Now you can't do the things that you used to be able to do because it's not binary like that. It doesn't work like that. People should be allowed to live their lives the way they want to, and they should be, people can criticize all they want to, they can say all they want to, but they should certainly be free of harassment until their decisions and their choices start to actually infringe upon other people's right to be left alone.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are free here at BillWhittle.com in these United States and around the world, frankly, to join with a band of happy conservatives as members at BillWhittle.com. I don't know if you can realize this when you just go to the website. You should be able to, but until you become a member, you're missing like half the site because you're missing the interaction with your fellow members, the comments under each video, the opportunity to read from the member-written blog. We're not dominating that blog.
Post your own articles.
And actually write on the member written blog. You can do that for yourself as well. We even have a member directory, and you can have private communications with fellow members. One of the outgrowths of that has been this idea of a Bill Whittle cruise that we're doing May 15th through the 18th, so that some of those folks like you, can get together in an atmosphere of, just warm Caribbean summer days and be able to enjoy relaxation and rejuvenation while hanging out with people with whom you're going to have a lot in common. You'll have a lot of laughter, a lot of fun. You're going to make some lifelong friends. If you haven't yet signed up for the Bill Whittle cruise, you can just go to BillWhittle.com and click on the big boat. If you'd like to become a member, you'll see that Become a Member link there as well. So for Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks for watching.